And then they bring them back.
The sound for me.
Okay,
Very clear.
good evening. This is the March 19th, 2025 meeting of the Needham Community Preservation Committee. I'm Dave Harrow, the D2 Chair. Excuse me. As a reminder, this meeting is being broadcast to the town's YouTube channel and via Zoom. It's being recorded for publication, later viewing, and administrative purposes. First, I will confirm the presence of members, as we have some that are calling in remote. When I call your name, please respond. Maureen,
Here.
Reg,
Present.
Jim,
Here.
Adam,
Here.
Paul,
Here.
Keith,
Here.
Marshall.
Here.
Okay, looks like everybody's here. All right, so we'll jump to the agenda. We have no meeting minutes. We'll get to those at our next meeting. To start out, we have Emily Ackenberg, our consultant for the housing projects here, and we want to spend a few minutes with Emily. She can update us on any new information she's reviewed, and also if any of the committee members have any questions that haven't been previously addressed, this would be the time to ask Emily. So Emily, you got the floor.
Okay, I don't have a lot to say. I guess last week or so, March 12th, I did send you a memo addressing the proposed increase from NHA of an additional $325,000, basically for an increase in tenant services, substantially more than what had been budgeted before, a reduction in the amount of the developer fee loan because of an error that had been made, and then a decrease in the cash flow during construction relating to their intent now to increase the amount of management fee below the line from 2 to 3%. I noted in that memo that their total cost due to the fine tuning they've been doing has actually decreased. So really what we're dealing with here, the total cost of the project have decreased in terms of the uses. But what we're dealing with here is a reduction in sources due to the mortgage reduction, which is in turn due to the increase in tenant services and the adjustment in the NHA loan going into the project and the amount of management fee below the line. They responded, and I guess I can't remember whether I sent you anything in terms of their response, but basically, my feeling is, given that you're dealing with budget constraints, it's sort of hard to be addressing yet another increase proposal from this applicant. The tenant services number seems to be all over the place. It went from nothing above the line to a fairly substantial amount above the line, and I guess the justification was that this is the current amount of tenant services that's being maintained at the property. It seems to be very much less than what's in the Linden Terrace proposal, which is also the Linden Terrace budget. The last one we saw, I have not seen a recent one, but this seems to be a variable that it's sort of hard to wrap your mind around it when it changes so much from one application to the next. And I guess I would say, to the extent that the cash flow available to the project is decreased because there's a proposed management fee increase below the line from 2 to 3%. I don't feel comfortable with that, because given that the project is so resource constrained, I think going to a higher proposed management fee doesn't make sense to me. So I'm not sure I see much justification for this additional 325,000, but it was sort of hard for me to take this seriously, given the constraints that you're expressing overall, to fund both projects at the level that they were at 2 weeks ago, I guess is my comment. And, I'm still sort of in the place I was the last time we met, which is to say, I think that there is, if in fact there's not enough money to fund both of these, it seems that there is more room in the East Moldisha Heights development, which is at perhaps a more formative stage. There's more room in there pro forma to imagine alternative funding structures, as I gave you the two examples that could be, plausibly a different approach for how those could be funded. And we talked last time about a couple of reductions in their budget that to me would seem to be sustainable, one or perhaps both, that would, reduce their the amount. I guess their initial amount was 3.5 million, in one case down to 3 million. And if we combine the two, what was it? Let's see. Alternative one was 3 million, the other was 2.5. And the combined would bring it down to 2.2, which is a very substantial reduction. So that's sort of, in the NHA proposal, it's hard to sort of pick apart on this it's hard to come up with alternative schemes like I felt comfortable doing for the Charles River project. Not that one project is more deserving than the other, but the Charles River project seems to have some alternatives that they could pursue, especially because they're at an earlier stage and they haven't gone in for funding yet. Whereas then we have this problem with the Seabed's Way, that even though it's not on that kind of funding track with the state, it is joined at the hip to the other project, Linden, that we want to see funded, which is on a track. So I feel a little bit, that you're under the gun on with Seabed's Way because it's tied to this other project that you want to see funded, which is, unfortunate in a certain sense that it creates a sort of a double burden on you, if that is not adequate funded sufficiently that it would be able to close this year. So that's where I'm at. I'm not sure if your number in terms of available funds has moved since we talked. It was 6 million the last time I met with you. I don't know whether that has changed.
We'll be getting into that
Yeah.
soon enough. Does any of the committee members have questions for Emily?
Emily, I have a question for you. I just want to understand in the Charles River Center proposal, the two areas that you think there's some flexibility is that the concession units and the income averaging, those 2 points that could together be $1.2 million reduction potentially.
Together would be, according to my numbers here, I haven't looked at this in a while, but I'm trusting my numbers, would bring the CPA amount down to 2.2 million from 3.5. So that's about $1.3 million reduction. Yeah.
And both of those suggestions were made to the developer team and they responded. Did you get any sense of whether if either one or both were eliminated, the project could not go forward?
Well, no, I mean, that's not what they didn't say that. The response to both.
No, I just wondered how they responded.
Their response was basically that those were reasonable ideas, but in terms of the income averaging, they feel that they can't bring that up with EOCD until they are, EOCD, right? EOHLC. I combined the two, the two initials into one new acronym. They feel that they don't want to bring it up until they're ready to make the submission, which would be next fall. They haven't brought it up yet. That's really the response. So that's a risk to them. If we say, we think this is the way you should do it, and there's a risk that it might not work out. With the other one, similarly, they haven't raised it with the investors, so they don't know. But, my feeling, let me put it this way, the concession thing as a whole, unique thing. I haven't seen that, I haven't seen that issue come up anywhere. Not to say that it hasn't, but I haven't seen it. But it's, they acknowledge that what I was suggesting seemed like a reasonable idea. It's just that they haven't brought it up with anyone. The other one, I have seen developments at this early stage come in, for funding, showing that in their pro formas. So, and that would be new construction projects as well as rehab projects. It's more of a guarantee, but I've seen numerous new construction projects making that assumption at this early stage. So I know that, there are developers that will assume that. And there are other things, we didn't raise with them, for example, why haven't they gone in for home funding, which the consortium, I assume, is available, to everybody in the region. They haven't pursued that. And we didn't actually ask that question. We probably should have. But that's, I don't know whether now they've missed the funding cycle that they would need. I don't know what the funding cycle is for that source.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Question for Emily? No? All right, Emily, thank you. You've been very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
Okay, before we start our discussions about the projects, I wanted to sort of ask a couple questions because I'm thinking maybe we can narrow the scope of discussions a little bit, if there's some consensus about, some general things. And so that's my intent for the next 5 minutes, is to ask a few questions to the committee, not a vote or anything, just to get the consensus by committee. First question I want to ask is does everybody understand what funds are available? I know that Cecilia put together a pretty well researched memo that discussed all the different sources and whatever, and then Lauren and I kind of summarized it in a one-page thing. We sent it around, so just want to make sure everybody understands.
And that's still accurate, Dave,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although my tendency to round things off gets,
Shot down.
people don't agree with it. That's
I
okay.
overrode that, so you have precise.
numbers.
That's the difference between engineering and accounting.
You're right.
Okay, so that's one question. The second question is everyone more or less agreeable to using the appropriation for 2026 together with what was passed forward from FY 2025 in order for us to distribute and make awards this year? I know historically the CPC, put the money forward, and what this means is next year there's going to be less money than typical, but it is what it is. So
We have five
Yeah.
projects now.
Yeah.
These are good applications, so I agree.
all right, so the third, I feel like I'm the foreman of a jury, asking the jury some questions here. All right, the third question I have is, are there any of the applications we have before us that we don't want to fund? All right. The next question is, now I'm gonna try to separate some issues here. Of the three
Yeah, exactly.
now, of the three recreation applications, are there any that we do not want to fund at the requested amount?
People,
That-
investments.
Like there's consensus.
Okay,
to fund it.
so, okay, so according to my little sheet here, that if there's none, then we can move to discussion of the housing applications. Which are the most important ones we have, okay. So with that in mind, I would like to, just kind of go around the table and ask, people, what their general feelings are. And
I can kick that off. I've spent a bit of time with Emily and
can I just say, one thing, I also want to ask maybe we should start off with the, liaisons, because the liaisons, hopefully have dug into things a little more and maybe,
sure.
their opinion, can come first.
So you and I are liaison for the Needham Housing Authority project for seabeds. And I had some supplementary questions myself. Emily was very generous with your time and it was very helpful to chat. And I also had an opportunity to speak with the Cambridge Housing Authority as well to get a little more clarity. I've dug in on both projects because affordable housing is my full-time job. So I have some familiarity with sources and uses. And, this is really the most difficult part of our job. All of these projects are very worthwhile projects. And we also, I think, have to, as part of our deliberation process, have to think through where each project is in its current stage. And that includes, in the funding stage and also what the impacts are. And there's a unique scenario that I think we're all familiar with NHA for seabeds is that, and I'll maybe take a step back. Seabeds is a $20 million project to renovate 43 units, which has about a $465,000 per unit price tag, and that's certainly, that's totally reasonable. It's within that sweet spot. So that's the high level. But there's also a direct correlation because of what we've been told about the Faircloth scenario. And it's not a common scenario in the sense that, and it adds all kinds of complication, which I'm not going to get into, but it does link directly to Linden Chambers, which is a project that we've already funded to a great degree by the town because we recognize that as a priority. It's not ordinary that you'd be in a scenario to kind of rush through development of another project to kind of make that work. But I think we have to show some flexibility. I think we have shown a lot of flexibility to the Needham Housing Authority. On its own, the project absolutely has merit. The unfortunate challenge is that we don't have the funding in front of us. I also had a chance to review, and also, sorry, I'll back up one more step. Seabeds, there's a great urgency with seabeds because of the impact to the Linden Chambers project, as opposed to the Charles River Center project, which it hasn't applied for funding yet, and it's at an earlier stage. Doesn't make it any less legitimate of a project. And, it serves a very critical need, and I want to fund it. I want to fund both of these. I think we all do. The question is to what extent, and therein lies the rub, where we're limited by the available balance, which is $6,040,223. So there are 1,000 different rationales to split that up. I'm going to just try and keep it easy for us tonight. I propose that we fund the Needham Housing Authority to the tune of $3,200,000. That's 53% of that funding available for housing. Once we, for housing, and that leaves therefore the balance of $2,840,223 for the Militia Heights project with the Charles River Center. It's less obviously than what their original need is. I get that. And yet it is more than than the income averaging approach that Emily had showed us and worked so diligently on. And I think that's a reasonable balance. We'd love to be able to fund both of these at full level. There's no question in our minds the impact that these projects will have on the audiences and the unique audiences that they both serve. And having dug in really to both of these numbers, that's where I settled.
All right, thanks. Maureen, do you wanna give us your analysis?
Yeah, I didn't come in with a set amount, like I didn't do that. I thought it was really gonna be more of a discussion and consensus, but I can certainly respond to Adam's recommendation. But anyway, yeah, Charles River Center has asked for 3.5 million to develop 3.5 acres of land up on East Militia Heights Way. They're going to have units divided kind of in half for people with intellectual disabilities, half just low income properties. So there's gonna be 86 units total. I agree with Adam that it's completely it's a population that is sort of desperate for housing, both low income and people with disabilities. There's just not nearly enough for either one of those two groups. So agree, I'm in favor of funding both Charles River and Needham Housing Authority. And it's difficult because I know the numbers have shifted for NHA. And Emily has some not concerns, but has some areas where she thinks that possibly Charles River might be able to knock it down a little bit. So, so I would like to fund it. I would like to fund my project, obviously, to the full extent that we can, but understanding that there are potential other funding sources for Charles River that would not be open to Needham Housing Authority. So, so I could agree to a number similar to what Adam proposes. I'm not going to kind of nail down a number because I think we really need to kind of hash it out and talk and all that. So
Just real quick, Adam, you said 3.2 million for CBIZ?
Yes.
I'm tracking all the numbers, so I can write it down for the final
Sure.
vote.
Thank you. Yes.
and then 2.8 for
2,840,223.
Yeah.
Which is effectively the balance.
All right, so anybody?
Well, I just echo, I mean, I didn't dig into the numbers the way Adam has, but I was prepared to come here tonight to say that I think seabed's the priority of the two, although both are extremely deserving. Because of the interconnectedness with Linden Street, the importance of funding seabed for that project as well. As far as the amount, I don't have a figure in mind. Haven't dug in as clearly, but I think that certainly should be a priority. And Charles River is just as deserving, but maybe they have that's why I asked Emily about those two areas where there might be some flexibility, because I had a feeling we might have to reduce CRC's funding.
Right.
Yeah, I have a lot of the same opinions. I think both projects are fantastic and I wish we could fund them both fully, but I feel like there's more flexibility with the CRC project. And I feel like our hands are really tied when it comes to NHA's ask, though, and I appreciate, the liaisons digging in, especially Adam digging into try to come up with some numbers that seem reasonable to allow, you know, the NHA project to continue forward, directly tied to the Lincoln Chambers. And so I think the numbers, they look right, you know, and I think, like I said, it's a difficult spot to be in because the Charles River Center, I mean, it sounds like it's going to really be like fantastic cutting edge, you know, example for what the state and hopefully the nation, you know, can do going forward, but we can't do it all, fortunately, so feels about right.
Paul?
I agree, I mean, I think I agree with it, I know I agree with everybody about wanting to fund Needham Housing Authority. I mean, we've got two projects that are hinging on this funding. Both great projects, I feel like Charles River has options to adjust its funding and seek maybe other private funding that the Needham Housing Authority doesn't have the opportunity to do. And so my inclination is to fund Needham Housing fully, whatever that means, and give the CRC the balance.
Let's go to the people on Zoom. Jim?
I totally agree. I can't really add anything. So, I mean, they've studied the numbers. The numbers are the numbers. And they're worthwhile projects.
Reg?
So I've been listening closely and I'm very appreciative of all the comments that came before now. I unfortunately have a conflict of interest here. So I have to obviously say that I wish there was some other way we could go because of the risk going forward with this project and the tenant services involved. But again, I enormously appreciate starting with Adam. And I know Adam doesn't have a lot of spare time. And he spent a lot of time digging into things. And I'm just going to, basically recuse myself of any further discussion at this point because of my obvious bias that I bring to the table here.
Okay, thanks, Reg.
But may the minutes specify that I fought tooth and nail for our residents and our project, et cetera, please.
All right, now my analysis, similar to Adam, I dug into some of the numbers, probably not as much as Adam, but I feel that the CRC project has a lot more flexibility than the Needham Housing Authority project. You know, first and foremost, the design for CRC is really in its infancy. They really don't have a design. They have a rendering and they have maybe a layout, but the design has yet to be developed. So that's, you know, I'm speaking as an engineer here, but that gives a lot of flexibility in the way things develop. Whereas the Needham Housing Authority project, they're dealing with a rehab. The things exist in time and space, and they don't have much flexibility. You know, they have to go to this, is a 25-year capital improvement analysis, and you know, their scope is pretty fixed. And then, as several of you have mentioned, in terms of the ability to look at, you know, additional funding mechanisms or whatever, I think Charles River has that ability. Not that it's easy to raise funds. I mean, we all know it's difficult, but I know the constituency of Charles River is a lot stronger than for Needham Housing Authority. So I think they have that flexibility. Finally, they have, these options that, our consultant Emily has brought up that, you know, yeah, they might increase the risk of the project a little bit, but, you know, it doesn't seem like they're gonna kill the project. It seems like, there are reasonable risks to take. With regard to, CPAT, you know, there's a lot of risks, certainly, but, some of it could be mitigated as the project moves forward. As I mentioned, they don't have a lot of scope discretion, but you know, there are some alternatives that were proposed that, you know, were good alternatives, but that does give them a little flexibility in terms of pricing this out. So I wouldn't say that they don't have some flexibility. I think they have some, but it's a lot less than Charles River. So bottom line is I am pretty much supportive of the numbers that Adam put forward, that we give each of the projects a little bit less than what they've asked. So any other discussion?
So we at this time then start making motions for the votes and as we have them in the articles. That's the case, then Mr. Chair, with respect to Article 20 to appropriate Needham History Center and Museum's ongoing collection storage upgrade, I move to recommend funding of the Needham History Center Museum's request for $46,712 for ongoing collection storage upgrades under the historic preservation designation, which will be transferred from the CPA Historic Reserve.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? I would just note that this money comes from a separate bucket,
Yes.
Yeah.
that I think we all understand that. Okay, if there's no additional discussion, we'll do a roll call vote here. Marshall,
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
Keith,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Maureen,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
and Reg,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye.
Mr. Chair, with respect to Article 21, I move to appropriate for Eden Conservation Department and Commission's trail signage improvements. I move to recommend funding of the Eden Conservation Department and Commission request for $104,000 for trail signage and improvements under the recreation designation with 17,000
Change in that,
with
the full amount coming from CPA free cash.
correction, with the full amount coming from CPA free cash.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, let's vote. Marshall,
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
Keith,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Maureen,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Reg,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye.
That, Mr. Chair, I move to Article now 22, appropriate for Charles River Center's East Militia Heights project. And there, with ask for a little bit of help.
Yeah, I'll fill in the numbers.
I move to recommend funding of the Charles River Center's request in the amount of $2,840,223 for construction costs associated with the East Militia Heights development under the category of community housing with
$741,180 to be transferred from CPA free cash and $2,099,043 to be transferred from CPA receipts.
That's my motion with.
I'll second that.
Okay, discussion? Any discussion? No discussion, let's vote, Marshall,
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
Keith,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Maureen,
Hi,
Jim,
Aye.
and Reg,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Okay, moving on.
Mr. Chair, Article 23. With respect to an appropriation for Needham Housing Authority's preservation of Seabed's Way. I move to recommend funding of the Needham Housing Authority's request in the amount of $3,200,000 for construction costs associated with the preservation of Seabed's Way under the category of community housing with
$872,545 to be transferred from the CPA Housing Reserve. $2,310,200 to be transferred from CPA Free Cash. And $17,255 to be transferred from FY 2025 General Reserve.
that's our motion.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, let's vote. Marshall,
Aye.
I had
Adam?
one question, I'm sorry. There was I was on audio, on mute there and juggling things there. There was a request to use a portion of that funding for construction closing costs, and the motion that was read by Adam did not cover that.
okay, that's a good question.
So how much do you need for closing costs?
Well, let me just ask Cecilia a question. Do we need to include that in the warrant?
It does not need to be included in the motion. It should be included in the article information, and if it's not, because we're still working through some of the information on eligibility, we can discuss it during the presentation.
Okay, is that okay, Reg?
So we don't have
Sure,
to make
yeah.
a firm decision on it tonight, and that doesn't mean it's off the table.
Yeah, but I think the committee understands that.
Yeah.
I think the committee generally is amenable to that.
Wait,
No,
can I
that's
ask that
fine.
question? I'm not clear what's being asked. If this is the issue of funding prior to closing, is that what we're
Yeah.
talking about?
Yes,
Okay, just to remind you that I made a recommendation to you that you not do that. Except that the discretion, I mean, you have to understand that's taking a risk. And an open-ended allowance for funding prior to closing, like tomorrow. Puts you at risk of not being able to, of losing that money and the project never closes. So my recommendation to you was that you only allow funding prior to closing when all of the funds for the project have been committed. And then at the discretion of the town.
all right, well, I think we understand that, but that's not on the table right at the moment here.
It's not in the motion, so we can continue with the motion and then
Yeah.
keep discussing that later tonight if you would like.
Thank you, Emily.
All right, so we have a motion on the table. Any more discussion? No, let's then vote. Marshall,
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
Keith,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Maureen,
hi.
Jim,
Aye.
Reg,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Okay,
Mr. Chair, with respect to Article 24, appropriate for Needham Park and Recreation Department Action Park and Pickleball Courts design. I move to recommend funding of the Needham Park and Recreation Department's request for $300,000 for the design of an action sports park and pickleball courts under the recreation designation, which shall be transferred from CPA free cash.
I'll second that.
any discussion?
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about this one. With the cost that's coming forward and then that will definitely be coming to us in the next year or two
Mhm.
for construction.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
knowing. I I worry about that a little bit. That's a concern I've had going through with, do we fund design when we might not have money to fund construction? I don't know that they also, do they have other funding sources or grants or anything else they could seek out to supplement? You know, kind of make up a shortfall because we don't have the money, because we're really, as we all know, we're spending it on the housing, which I totally agree with, but that's going to leave us with less to spend next year, and this is gonna be an expensive project.
Yeah, I mean,
Well-
I think that's a good question. I think
I like the project, don't get me wrong, I have
Yeah.
nothing against the project, I think it's needed, but I do think that,
there is no, guarantee that the CPC will fund any future projects.
Right.
Okay, and historically, with regard to recreation, the CPC has only funded a, subset of recreation projects. And so, I think that's something for the town, for the Recreation Commission and the Recreation Department to be thinking about, that, there's obviously not enough money in the, in the CPC.
for us to fully fund, the
Yeah,
project of
And
that
then
scope.
further, I would say that, the recreation has gotten more than a fair share.
Over the years, yeah.
Yeah, so, I think that's a concern, but I don't think it's a concern of this committee. I think it's a concern of, the Recreation Department in terms of moving forward. Now, if somebody would ask me, do I think, the town would abandon this project if they didn't get CPC money for construction? I don't think that's the case, but, we'll see. Jim, you had a comment?
Well, look at last year, the town put up some of the money for the tennis courts. So just as an example,
Yep,
All right, any other, discussion?
I like the project, as I said,
Alright,
it's just
so-
the money.
Sorry.
Okay, let's vote. Marshall,
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
Keith,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Maureen,
I,
Jim,
aye,
Reg,
Aye.
and chair votes aye.
Mr. Chair, I move under Article 25 to appropriate for Needham Department of Public Works and Needham Park and Recreation Departments Elliott School Grounds renovation design. To see if the town will vote yes to raise and or transfer and appropriate the sum of $69,960 for the design of the Elliott School Grounds renovation project to be spent under the direction of the town manager. And to meet this appropriation, that said sum be transferred from CPA FY 2025 general reserve.
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion? No discussion, vote, Marshall,
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
Keith,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Maureen,
I,
Jim,
aye,
Reg,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye.
Finally, Mr. Chair, under Article 26, appropriate fiscal year 2026 CPA budget and reserves. I move to recommend that pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 44B, the estimated fiscal year 2026 Community Preservation Fund revenues be appropriated or set aside for future appropriations as follows. A, administrative and operating expenses of the Community Preservation Committee in the amount of $82,000. And I see that under reserve, the open space reserve, we have $438,000.
That's correct.
Somebody want a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, let's vote. Marshall,
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
Keith,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Maureen,
I,
Jim, Jim,
aye,
and Reg,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Okay, I think that's our last, item, with regard to, our motions and funding. And I, thank everybody for, weighing in on this difficult decision, but I'm impressed that we got through this in a very, expedient manner.
Sounds like a real engineer.
I was gonna say, no fist fights, no fist fights broke out
Alright.
at the meeting.
Thanks for digging into the numbers. Yeah.
Okay, so, moving forward on the agenda here. We have, an update for Linden Street redevelopment. I think, Reg, you had reported that you had submitted the application, and I guess things are going according to plan so far, right?
Yep, at this point, you sit there and wait for EOHLC to go through their internal process, and we don't expect to hear back about it much before the end of May, but the extremely earliest, and probably more like June timeframe. And when they announce, the governor actually announces all the winning projects.
Okay, well, that's gonna come sooner than later, I think.
The committee had
About
asked.
$58 million is, it kind of weighed in at total project cost here, plus or minus a few bucks.
Yeah, and then, Lauren just mentioned that with regard to the grant agreement, I think, you distributed that.
Yes.
To everybody, yeah. It seems pretty straightforward. Lot simpler than I thought it was, but that's good.
It was, I think protected the town's interest and Needham Housing Authority's interest and our new developer partners' interest. So, and that, by the way, had to go in with the application on the 27th. So it did. And I think in the packet was the cover letter, the transmittal letter that went in with it. The game's afoot, Sherlock, or I guess Watson. I got that one backwards, didn't I? Well, I'm a little jet lagged here.
Did you just arrive, Reg?
No, but it doesn't mean we haven't had very long days.
Yes.
Okay, I guess, Emily, I think we can release you. Go have dinner or whatever. Again, we appreciate your insight and your knowledge and advice.
Your guidance.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Comes to, you know,
it's,
This is like this second year in a row.
Well, I'm glad you got to a resolution. That wasn't easy, but thank you.
And, I want you to know that we are gonna follow up on, this, concept that you put forward about, loans, even though it's taken us it's taken us a couple of years. That is gonna be on the agenda for the select board this summer when they, have their retreat and, try to get something established so that the next time, the possibility comes up, we'll be in a position to be able to, use that, mechanism.
I also, if I can, if we still have, Emily, I hope and I think that we will have access to. I want to pick up on the recommendation about how to potentially structure any pre-closing dispersal. That was good guidance.
Okay, good.
And the affordability issue will be dealt with by the town. Is that my understanding?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to weigh in on that if anybody wants, to talk to me about it. I think I haven't looked carefully at the Linden agreement, but I think there's, I have some thoughts on that as well. But I think that, it's important for you to have an affordability restriction on all of these projects, given the significant amount of funding that's going into them.
Yeah.
Emily, just
Just to confirm before you go, your recommendation on those affordability restrictions was just simply endorsing or enforcing the affordability restriction that the applicants were already proposing, but in such a way that they would be in perpetuity and survive catastrophic events and foreclosure, right?
Yes, basically, and they're different affordability restrictions on each of these projects, right? You know, the one that has the tax credits is one thing, but, you know, I would also, the point about the commitment to continue the project-based Section 8 contract is important, even though there is, you know, there's something like that in their existing restriction, because we don't know with NHA, as they've explained to us, exactly what HUD is gonna do now that they're merging the two programs, the RAD and the project-based voucher for projects like this, but we haven't seen the affordability restriction that will result from that, whether it's gonna be different from the one that's there now. So I wanted to specify both the renewal of the project-based subsidy contract and the underlying affordability for the units generally. I think I addressed both of those in the condition, yeah.
Okay, well, thanks again, Emily.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item we have is the schedule and, you know, planning for town meeting. I know that we didn't go through this on the motions, but you know, the prevailing practices that the CPC makes the initial presentation to town meeting on these warrant articles. And then I guess the applicant could be in the background in case any detailed questions come up. But, you know, the CPC would make, you know, brief introduction to the warrant articles at town meeting. Now, some of these warrant articles may go on the consent agenda. We don't know that, but so we should be prepared to make a brief presentation. And it's historically, it's been the liaisons to do that. And so, you know,
So I guess I'm doing the conservation one, I assume, the trail.
it's either you or Reg.
Well, I think Reg has his plate is full,
Okay, yeah,
so
all
I
right.
volunteer.
Okay,
I second his volunteer.
all right, and then his three, that would probably be you, Jim, right?
Yep.
Okay, and then we already had a volunteer for the Needham Housing Authority. And
I'll do the Charles River.
Charles River and
At least one each. I
One
think.
split.
Sure. Why not?
So-
I don't know, we divvy it up.
Just as a matter of technicality, I think for anyone that's not a town meeting member, you'll have to be, just as a procedural matter, I think recognized by the moderator to be able to come up and to speak.
yeah, so you have to go up and just before the meeting starts and tell them that you'd like to speak. Or maybe we could do it, you and I could do it.
If you get me a list, I can coordinate with the moderator in
Okay,
advance.
yeah.
Yeah, so we can just send it to them in advance. You don't have to worry about it tonight.
Yeah.
All right, good.
And Keith and I are town meeting members. Jim, are you a town meeting member?
No,
And Reg, you're a town meeting member, I think, right? Yeah, so the three of us can deal with some stuff on the floor, just to be able to get recognized and so.
Yeah, okay.
And are these all like PowerPoint presentations? or
Yeah,
just
I mean,
an
that's been
introduction?
Yeah,
historically, with regard to the like the Trails project, I can send you what we've done before, but I don't think you need all that.
Yeah.
You know.
All right, well, I'll talk to
Yeah,
you before.
you can shorten
And we
it.
can chat about the logistics, but typically, typically, I think the chair allows up to like 15 minutes per article in a presentation, but there's nothing here that I see that should really take more than 5 minutes. I've done this a lot. I'm happy to help.
Yeah.
Everyone, And I'm happy to, volunteer for Article 26 if you like,
which is sort of,
appropriate the CPA budget reserves.
well, you're doing the. Yeah, I can do the,
Teamwork, look at that. We all have a task.
So who's doing pickleball and Elliot?
You wanna choose, Paul?
Yeah.
I won't go
You
for
can-
it.
eeny, meeny.
Yeah, you do pickleball.
I'll do the action part. Yeah,
Okay, because
for
you've
sure.
been getting.
Elliot's.
Bring it,
Sure, it's
bring
the
it.
least controversial.
Bring a prop with you.
That's
Kids playground, that's right.
Bring a skateboard with you.
That's right, exactly. Pickleball, paddleball, away.
I would like to ask Cecilia if I can.
Yeah.
Some of the logistics and Lauren, so town meeting is May, when?
May 5th.
May 5th?
Yes.
And when is the warrant finalized?
Tomorrow.
I need to get the final edits to Kate tomorrow. I believe it's getting sent to the printer at the end of this week.
Sorry, May 10th is a Saturday,
No,
May 5th.
May 5th.
May 5th is the.
5th,
it's a Monday.
Cinco de Mayo Day, okay.
Wow.
Uh,
Mother is still
I think
after that.
So no liquid lunch.
I can, yes. There's been draft warrants posted online in the select board packet, but they're kind of buried in that packet. So I can pull out the most recent draft warrant, but it won't have the edits from tonight. After the edits from tonight, I can circulate it.
Well, maybe it's finalized.
Yeah,
So are they voting tomorrow to finalize it?
they're voting on Tuesday to finalize it and then it goes to the printer.
So can you send that to us tomorrow or next week?
Can I send it on Friday when the
That's
select
fine.
board packet comes out and then that you'll have the same version as the
The
select
final.
board?
Please,
Yeah.
please go.
And that'll be the version they're voting on.
Thank you very much.
Good.
Yeah.
That's great. Do you need any help with any of the article information?
No, so that's been all drafted, thanks to Lauren. And so we're finalizing some of that tonight, and then I will be sending over the final versions of the article information with the votes that we took today, and the exact dollar amounts and funding sources over.
Great. Thank you.
All right, I guess the next thing we want to talk about is, the meeting schedule, I guess, we had a few things already scheduled, but we can go over that, maybe we want to adjust it, so,
Well, I noticed that our next meeting is actually the same night that finance committee would like to see us.
Yeah,
So
well-
we may need to, in case finance committee is not satisfied with just the memorandum and does have questions for us, perhaps we start our meeting half an hour late that night and move it to town hall.
I guess, but I'm still waiting to understand what this meeting is about.
Especially after the warrant by then is closed.
Yeah,
The finance committee was just, so they will be meeting to make their recommendations.
And they want our.
And they wanna know how CPC voted. So what we can do is I can send over the vote to them. And then Lauren, if you just wanna be in contact with Molly, if they would still like to meet with you after they have the vote or not.
yeah, okay.
But yeah.
Apologize.
Logan Airport. calling me.
Exactly, exactly. No, they're fine. They still have.
Oh, they haven't-
I'll be done in 2 minutes. I can sleep before they get home, before I pick them up. So. Wrap it out.
Yeah, okay. No, I just,
What is the next meeting?
Wondering,
So the next meeting is
Oh,
April
there it
2nd.
is, I see.
you're
I'm
one
hoping they won't need it as
Yeah.
another meeting because of everything being voted on already and they'll have that information.
we'll play that by ear, I guess.
Uh-huh.
So the next meeting technically
Possible.
is,
April 2nd.
April
Which-
2nd. And perhaps for just now, maybe everybody can have in their mind that we may need to push it back to 7:30 and move it to town hall in the event that we have to meet with finance committee, but we can make a final decision on that once we resolve that with the finance committee. And I'll send out an email to let
Sure.
everyone know. And then we have the 16th held as a possible meeting if needed.
Right.
But for the second, ideally, is everybody expected to come with their presentations to sort of do a run through? Is that really what we're expecting
April
to
2.
have happen, or when? I mean, I think it would be important to do a run through, right? Just to everybody. Maybe not, but I think
don't
it'd be
remember that
good to get
happening.
feedback from the committee.
I mean, I think that's a decision that you all can make. I don't, since I've been with the committee, I don't think I remember committee doing that, but I don't think it's a bad idea for everybody to win.
That's probably a good
You
idea.
know, I'm happy to, to help with any of these presentations. I've done a lot of it for the planning board.
Yeah,
At the planning board, we don't typically, like when I've done them, I haven't shared them in advance with, with the planning board. They just kind of. And that's pretty much true with other planning board members and other zoning that we've done. But it doesn't mean that we can't do it.
Yeah, can I just interject something, because this was on the agenda before, but I don't think. I skipped over it, but, we had a meeting with the select board. Maureen, I, and Lauren, and Steve was here, and, they asked a few questions, but in general, I think they're positive about the projects,
Yeah.
And then we had a meeting with, the planning board, which I don't think we reported back. And it was the same thing. There was a few questions, nothing major.
finance committee.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You were there.
Yeah, so, there was a few questions, and there was one sticky question. That I don't necessarily think we need to go into tonight about, transfer,
The money.
clawing back some money. Maybe we already talked about this.
Yeah, last week.
Yeah.
I think it was mentioned.
So, the feeling we got is that there are people that want that question answered, because it might come up at town meeting, so there'll be some other ideas that people might have as to what needs to be addressed up front. Mostly on the housing projects, so, that. I think it'd be good that we kind of go over what the, brief presentation that the, liaisons are gonna make. But I don't think it should be more than 5 minutes, total, but that's, yet to be seen. And then we met with T-Chart. And, we didn't really get that much feedback from T-Chart, but I think they, are aware of the projects and, generally supportive, so.
May I ask, with respect to the presentations, are you all interested in preparing your own? Or did you want me to make a first pass and then share it with you and you make revisions? How do you want to handle it?
You may take the easy answer and say yes or no.
Yeah. Thank you, Lauren.
I mean.
Visual with the planning board.
Well, why don't I make the first draft and then each of us can work on it together with
that
your
sounds good.
respective
Thank you.
presentations.
No more than 5 slides.
Okay.
We have information from all the
Yeah.
projects
Yeah,
they
yeah,
provided to us already, so some visuals, which I think people need to see and wanna see, so.
I think what will be key is making sure that we include the specific pieces of information with respect to the housing projects that Cecilia mentioned earlier.
I wanna make sure that at least for the CVETs, that I don't leave anything out, so.
Yeah.
And we'll have on Friday, we'll have usually the warrant information for the articles includes a lot of that detail, so. We can probably pull it out, but I wanna make sure that. The presentation and the oral remarks and the visual display that. We're touching all those points for sure, and somewhat more complicated than. Also, we have the projects.
So are you proposing, Lauren, to send all of us that before the April 2nd meeting? Is that?
If that's the date you'd like to share and kind of roundtable them, sure.
Is that enough time for
Yeah,
you?
time
Should
for you.
should we delay till the 16th? That still gives us enough time to make changes and, I just don't want, there's been so much work this cycle for you. I'm like, I would
They
just
get,
like
they get
to.
paid.
Yeah.
But
I said they get paid.
I know they do. I know they do, but it's still a lot of work, and if you think that's gonna be a
I
time
think I
crunch for
I think
you.
I can put together drafts, but
Okay,
early enough for all of you to have some rounds of back and forth with me on it, maybe not.
mhm.
You know, if you want to kind of really refine it before you come in and present it to the whole committee, then maybe the 16th is better, but if a rough draft is good for the second, then I can make that happen.
I would just comment that the public hearing version is not a bad place to start with, because it had the same sort of time and budget dimension, and, you know, it was the sort of the most up-to-date version of the presentations
Yeah,
that we received all winter here. So, you know, I would recommend, you know, starting that with a base of, and then you're not really reinventing the wheel on these presentations. You're just, you know, you know, recycling them to another dimension of public use.
Okay.
Good idea.
Yeah, that is a good idea. And this way also the slides will have a consistent look. I think they're pretty basic at town meeting from what I recall from the last two. So I'll just kind of stick with the kind of format that we used previously.
Yeah, it should be readable.
Picture of Dave's face. in the middle of it.
Do a lot of Ed Olson's clients.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
gosh,
clients,
yeah.
yeah.
Um. You know, as far as the schedule goes, there's something I think we forgot. And that is doesn't the league have a annual warrant?
Yes,
uh,
that's right.
Right.
Review, and don't members from this
Yeah.
committee go
Oh,
there?
yeah. Yeah, we did that last
I
year.
don't think I've seen,
I
A
haven't seen the
date for
date
that
yet,
yet.
you're right.
no, I've seen the date for the
Yeah.
candidates,
Right,
Yeah,
but I haven't seen a date for,
It may not have
Like
published
town
yet.
they're probably gonna do it after maybe the election, I'm guessing, because there's
Right.
time
That's right.
afterwards, yeah.
it
So-
is usually a very similar week.
Isn't it the week before typically, like the day before, I feel like?
Before.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
last year was the week before
Oh.
town meeting started.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
That Monday, so if they're following the same thought process. Then aiming for Monday, April 28th, yeah, I have a hold on my calendar for that, oh, yeah. We haven't heard from League of Women Coders, so we already held the date. So I would just hold the Monday, the 28th, and then as soon as one of us gets any information, we can pass it
Yeah.
along.
so for the new people on the committee, I guess we try to have one person in each group of precincts. I think they combine precincts.
Yeah,
together.
there's a couple that are combined.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we try to have at least one person, and then,
Yeah,
like, I know last year Reg was floating
Right,
around because, you know, there might be more detailed questions that would come up. So,
And we're both in
Did-
E.
yeah.
Can I just expand on that slightly for the new members? When you say one member, you know, attends, you know, presents A and B, another one attends C and D, et cetera, and that one person answers any questions that come up on all the applications.
right, Right.
With the exception of the housing applications, that what has evolved over the last 4 years is they're so complicated and they're, you know, weird questions that come up that for the Needham Housing Authority, yeah, I've been the one who's sort of floated. I run from one room to another room to another room. And there's a virtual room now that they do as well, which is all online. And they hold, if they get to the warrant articles and I'm not there yet, then they hold it and skip over it and then circle back. Just to be a little bit more specific for the new members who haven't been part of this. Part of the reason I wanted to do that is it seems to me, and Maureen, you saw this last year and Dave did, that might be something that needs to be done with the CRC housing project as well, because it's sort of similarly a more complicated thing than putting, you know, trail signs in.
Yeah, so we should probably contact CRC and have them nominate somebody to do that.
So that's traditionally the week before the town meeting, is that what?
Yeah, let's,
Yeah,
I think on a Monday night,
yeah. So it's April
The-
28th.
The Monday before the Tuesday of town meeting. It's Monday before the Monday of town meeting, yes.
The week before.
Yeah, April 28th.
okay,
One more thing that I just mentioned, maybe for our new members, Dave, Mr. Chair, is there's a preparation of frequently asked questions document that is often done for our articles that have to be assembled and put together, and I forget what the deadline that is, but the town moderator likes to have all that sort of posted on by a certain day, like 2 weeks ahead of time or something like that. Cecile, you might have a better recollection of the dates on that.
Oh,
Do we usually do a report to town meeting?
yeah, I think we try to get it posted, the FAQs sometime in April. But let me find out and I'll get back to you all on when they're looking to have FAQs posted.
I suggest we just make that an agenda item on our next meeting on the 2nd.
yeah, the presenters could maybe draft up what they think. Appropriate question, yeah.
It sounds almost like it's about process, like frequently asked questions, because I don't know, like, it doesn't seem like any of these are gonna be frequently asked questions. They're like specific to projects. I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I'd like to look at last year's. I'm not sure what we included.
I wanna say we just did it for the housing project.
Okay,
I don't think it was for everyone, but let me.
yeah, I don't remember.
you could send me, you send us the,
Last year's.
last year's FAQ for the housing.
Yeah, so we just did an FAQ for the housing project.
Okay,
So you would.
so we'll do both. We'll do, I guess both of us will do some questions that we think might come up or might.
And you could, I want to talk to Emily and also some of the people at the CRC.
They already did one.
I think Emily's report, when I read it, I thought to myself that it was kind of a good framework for town meeting for starting.
Yeah,
And I
questions.
believe part of the push for the FAQ on the Linden project last year was there were multiple town meeting articles that were all related, so it was also explaining how all of the articles were related to each other.
this is
This is a little more straightforward.
Well, like for seabeds, what we'll need to
Exactly,
explain is the
linkage.
interconnection.
yeah, exactly.
And that was one comment that the select board wanted to make sure that we were able to express clearly to town meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, they brought that up a couple of times, that they felt like town meeting members were gonna remember that housing authority said they weren't coming back. And here they are, back again, and why is that? And so that we need to make that clear to them, that this is why they're back. And this is why this funding is needed. So they definitely brought it up like twice, at least during that meeting, so they felt like it was an important point to make for town meeting members to understand.
But they won't be coming back,
No, that they
Why
had
did
said
they?
last year that they would not be coming back this year,
right?
and they have, and then.
Yeah,
So what
but
happened?
the
What happened to
lawsuit, I
that?
know.
Why is it necessary to
I
come
totally
back, you know?
understand.
Okay.
Yeah, I just didn't remember the commitment not come back last year, but I don't know you at all.
No, I quite honestly, it doesn't stand out to me either, but they kind of remember.
I wouldn't put it
Yeah.
I wouldn't put it in the context of a commitment. I think it was just, this is our plan.
Right.
We don't expect, we don't
Yeah.
anticipate
Exactly.
coming back, or I
I
don't know how it
would
was worded, but-
focus more on the housing authority is requesting this money tied to Linden because of the unrelated lawsuit that HUD is facing
Mhm.
on the program that they were hoping to do. That we're not involved in the lawsuit, it's just HUD, but that's really the, propelling factor for why they're coming.
It was not
In a-
their intention.
In a,
Yeah.
in a positive manner.
Yeah.
Which he's good at that. He gets stuff through the planning board all the time.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so, anything else?
I don't think so.
Anybody else have, anything? Reg, Jim? No? All right,
Mr. Chair, I move we adjourn.
Second,
all right, let's vote. Marshall,
aye.
Adam,
Aye.
Keith,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Maureen,
Aye.
Reg,
Aye.
and Jim.
Aye.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
You know.
Enjoy your pint, Reg.
Yeah. Enjoy the rest of your visit there.
This
Reg.
is the, behind me is where I was a couple of days ago. It's the, called the Old Library in Trinity College. Was built about 17 something or other. And in it is one of the oldest books in the world, and the Book of Kell that
Oh,
was
that's-
written about 500 AD. And it, it really looks like this behind me. It's definitely worth putting on your bucket list if you're interested in this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Enjoy the rest of your trip.